Okay, well, I'd just like to say a few words about the broad idea that the People's Assembly was founded on, and the national conference that we held on the 22nd of June, which established the Assembly nationally, what its kind of foundational idea is. And it's really remarkably simple. When we began this, we thought, look, this crisis has been with us since 2007, 2008. But there have been already a whole series of battles, and indeed a whole series of organisations formed to fight those battles. The pensions dispute that the trade unions were involved with, the huge student rebellion against fees in 2010. Keep our NHS tough, the bedroom tax campaign. I could multiply this many times over. But it seemed to us that while there was absolutely no point in reproducing those campaigns, in trying to substitute for those campaigns and trying to do the work which they're doing very effectively, there was an elementary need for there to be a national anti-austerity body that was taking on the government's austerity policies as a whole. Not because the other campaigns can't fight and can't win. They can. In London we had a magnificent campaign around the Lewisham Hospital, which was at least a partial victory, around the closure of the A&E in the Whittington Hospital, and there are many other instances. Many of the trade union struggles have actually been effective, and we should note victorious, the Lindsay Oil workers dispute, the dispute of the spark, the electricians on the London sites, on the London buses. All this is obviously the foundation on which any other campaign must and should be built. But we all know that all of this is coming from one place. We all know that the attack on education, the attack on the health service, the bedroom tax, the attack on disability payments, the attacks on the trade unions, the fact that real wages are sliding for one of only 2 times in the post-war period in this country, they are all coming from one place, and it is the eaten mess which is the government in this country. That's where it's coming from, and if we're to stop it, if we're not just to stop it here or stop it there, if we're to stop it all, we have to have a national campaign whose aim is either to force the government to abandon austerity or force the government from power. And that requires a different order of campaign. It requires everybody uniting. No matter what your first cause was, no matter what element of this crisis affects you most, if we don't stand in solidarity and we don't stand together, we can't break a government whose whole principle is that the rich must stand together against us, that the rich must unite against us, that there's one group of people who aren't going to pay for this crisis, it's the people who made it. And if there's one group of people in their mind that are going to pay for this crisis, it's the people who didn't cause it. That's the policy of the government, it's the policy of the whole government, it's what stands behind each and every attack on our living standards and our welfare state, and if we don't confront them all together, we can't beat them all together. That is the very simple. But there's something else as well. It's not just that if we don't all stand together, we can't all win together. It's not just that we don't all stand together, we can't beat a government which is the source of all this together. It's this. It can be worse than that. It's not just that we can't win, but that we will be picked off one by one. If we don't have a national campaign against all government policy, they will always say to us, all right, we'll retreat on the Whittington, we'll retreat on Lewisham Hospital, but somewhere else, in some other part of the country, somebody else will be made to pay. If we can't force it through on disability benefit, we'll force it through on single parents. If we can't get them, we'll get some other group. And if we don't all stand together, not only will they pick us off singly, not only will they attempt to divide and rule, but they will introduce, as they are attempting to do on a daily basis, a certain kind of poison into the society. The kind of poison which says there is a deserving and an undeserving poor. There are hard-working families, I never met one yet that wasn't, but there are hard-working families and there are scroungers. There are people who are born in this country who are entitled to benefits, and there are foreigners and immigrants who are not. There are people who are our kind of people, and there are the others. There will be an absolutely poisonous policy of divide and rule, a racism, a discrimination that will justify this in the mouths of government ministers if we don't form a united movement. So it is not just that only a united movement can win, but that only a united movement can defend us from the attempts to divide us, to turn one group of working people against another, to get one group of working people to say, yes, it's this other group that should pay for the crisis. It is elementary self-defence. It is elementary inoculation against the poison of racism, discrimination, and divide and rule. So those are the basic ideas behind this. As Annette said, there will be many, many valuable discussions, because nobody acts without inspiration, without motivation, without knowledge, without discussion, without debate. And the People's Assembly was created in order that the environment could be there for people to do just that. But in the end of the day, it has to be about more than discussion and debate, however essential that is. It has to be about action. If there is one thing, more than anything else, that we found this for, is to up the level of action to the point where the government cannot pursue its policy any longer. And we have coming up before us now some months where a variety of different forms of action are taking place. I know that the next union, the PCS and the NUT, will be engaged in industrial action. There's talk, and I hope that it's talk, that results in action of the CWU, the Postal Workers Union, that are fighting off privatisation of the Post Office, and the Fire Brigade Union, who especially in London are looking at a series of absolutely horrific closures to fire stations, acting together in coordinated strike action. But let's be clear, strike action is not just the business of those unions on any one day who happen to be at the forefront of it. It is about all of us. When those actions happen, those trade unions deserve and should demand that there is a level of solidarity which makes them confident and capable of risking their time and their money and their jobs in order to take that kind of action. We're about creating the environment in which industrial action is both successful, supported, seen as legitimate, and a threat to the government which they cannot write off as a group of simply interested parties who don't have the support of the rest of the community. That's what the demonstration is about, and that's spoken very clearly and very articulately about what Manchester and the rest of us can do on that day. We in the People's Assembly are absolutely committed to the idea that a sea of ordinary working people has to isolate that island of privilege, which will be the Tory party conference, and say to them, you are not this nation. You are opposed to this country and the working people in it, and we won't stand for what you're trying to do for the historic achievement of the welfare state and the trade union movement in this country. It is not going to happen that you are going to take away from us what generations of working people have fought to achieve, and think that you will do it without us trying to pull you out of the seat of power before you get the chance to ruin our lives and the lives of the children and the generations that come after us. That's the task on the 29th of September. We've committed in London. We've just decided that the People's Assembly is going to book a 700-seater train to bring up to Manchester on that day. I think if the response to that is anything like a response to the People's Assembly itself, it won't be one train, it'll be more than one train that we bring to Manchester on that day. In every rally, in every place that we're holding the People's Assembly, we're saying to people, if you do nothing else, be in Manchester on the 29th of September. If you do nothing else this year, that's the place to register your protest at what this government is doing to our lives. Now, there are something like 40 or 50. I keep losing track. Every time I look at the website, there's another People's Assembly being formed. Not just in Liverpool and Manchester and Sheffield and Newcastle, where you might expect them to be, but the Wilts and Dorset People's Assembly has been formed. The Chelmsford People's Assembly has been formed. There are People's Assemblies taking place not just in cities and towns, but in villages now in parts of this country. And that is the scale of movement that is required. The People's Assembly was bigger than all the party conferences put together. And that's how it should be. Because working people in this country, working people anywhere at any time, only really have two things. They do not have money. They do not have power. They do not have weapons. They cannot enforce their will in any other way than through the two things that they do possess: their numbers and their organisation. And the truth of the matter is that even the numbers aren't any good without the organisation. This is a historic time for the Labour movement. It's a historic time for the Labour movement, as Maxine Peake reminded us all in the magnificent recitation of Shelley's The Mask of Anarchy. I'd forgotten the line in that poem which says, "Let a great assembly be of the fearless and the free." This is a great assembly of the fearless and the free, and we are going to take the battle to the Tory government, and either it will abandon austerity or it will be forced from power. Thank you very much.